Hey guys, Jerome here. What's going on? It looks like we are 24 hours away, well, less than 24 hours away from the new announcement for the Nexus phones, for the Nexus 5X and the Nexus 6P. I know I've been doing a lot of videos lately on the Nexus, but it's one of my favorite phones. I follow it every year, I get it every year, and I wanted to make this video to compare the differences between the 5X and the 6P. I didn't want to do another drill down of the specs. You guys can look at an older video that I've made that goes down the reported specs, but I wanted to go over the actual differences between the two phones, spec-wise, price-wise, and maybe this will help you give a better idea if the 5X is the phone you're looking for or the 6P. So the first thing, that I wanted to talk about was the display size. So the 5X, of course, is coming in at a 5.2-inch display. The 6X is coming in at a 5.7-inch display. So you don't have to watch this whole video if you know that you want a 5.2-inch phone over a 5.7-inch phone. Some people prefer smaller phones, but I'll tell you guys, I am going to be picking the 6P. It's not the size of the phone that's why I'm picking it. It's that the 6P, looking at the specs, has better specs on paper than the 5X. Now I know specs don't mean everything, but I'm kind of one of those junkies that wants like the best of the best, and the 6P seems to have higher specs than the 5X. It doesn't mean that it's better. I mean, we don't really know for sure, but on paper it looks that way, and that's the way I'm leaning towards. So right now I want to go through all of the differences. Again, the biggest difference between the 5X and the 6P is a 5.2-inch display on the 5X and a 5.7-inch display on the 6P. So the 5X is going to be running an 808 Snapdragon processor. The 6P is going to be running an 810 Snapdragon processor. So the 6P will have a slightly better, faster processor. I know there have been issues with the 810 and overheating, but they're calling it version 2.1, which I believe has fixed those issues. So it looks like 810 is going to be the better processor. As far as RAM, the 5X is going to have 2 gigabytes of RAM, and the 6P is going to have 3 gigabytes of RAM. So that's a nod off again to the 6P. Internal storage. So on the 5X internal storage, you have two options. You have 16 gigabytes and 32 gigabytes. On the 6P, you have 32 gigabytes starting, 64 gigabytes, and you can get up to 128 gigabytes of internal storage on the 6P. As far as resolution goes, so resolution on the 5X is going to be a 1080p display, and it pushes, if I did the numbers or looked at the numbers right, the 1080p display on the 5X pushes at 423 ppi, pixels per inch. On the 6P, it's at a 1440p display, pushing 518 pixels per inch. So you're going to have a better display on the 6P than you would on the 5X. The 5X is a smaller screen though, so I don't really know if it's going to make that much of a difference, but spec-wise, on paper, the 6P has a better display. And it also has a higher level of PPI. Also, I've read that the 6P is going to have Gorilla Glass 4. I didn't see anything about Gorilla Glass 4 on the 5X. It would be nice if they put it on there, but if they don't, I'm pretty sure then the Nexus 5X will have Gorilla Glass 3, which is still really good. I haven't really had issues with screen cracking or anything like that. But I know Gorilla Glass 4 is is less susceptible to cracking, and people are saying that it might even be shatterproof, but who knows, Battery wise, so the battery on the 5X is going to be 2700 milliamp hour battery. Which is really good though for a 5.2-inch display, 2700 milliamp battery, and the 6P though is going to have 3450 milliamp hours. Now, just because the 6P has a bigger battery doesn't mean that it's better. It doesn't mean that the battery is going to last longer either. We don't know that for sure. You have to remember that the 6P is going to have a bigger battery because one, it has a bigger display, and two, it's pushing a higher resolution at 1440p versus 1080p. So again, The 6P has a bigger battery. On paper, it's a bigger battery, but it's also doing a lot more work. I don't know if the 810 processor also drains the battery more than an 808, but I couldn't tell you on that one. And then finally, there's price. So I wanted to explain price because I know price is very important to everybody. So the price that is being reported on the 5X is going to be $379.99 for the 5X. 16 gigabytes, $379.99. Now the 6P is going to be 32 gigabytes, $499.99. So that's a big difference. It's a $120 difference in price. I was actually surprised that the 6P is going to be starting at $499.99. It was cheaper than I thought it was going to be, which is great for me. I'm sure it's great for everybody. It's a cheaper price. But I wanted to put this in perspective if people are thinking about price. So the 5X, again, is $379.99, but that's 16 gigabytes. If you're thinking about getting the 32 gigabyte version, and Google is kind of maybe if Google follows the same way Motorola does it on storage, pricing storage, I would imagine that a 32 gigabyte 5X would probably be $50 extra at $429.99. So then if you want to compare the 5X 32 gigs, $429.99 versus a 6P, 32 gigs, $499.99, then you're only talking about like an $80 difference there, or $70 difference. I'm not the best at math. $70 difference. So for $70 difference with the same gigabyte, 32 gig, the 6P will give you a faster processor, it will give you a better display, it'll give you more RAM. It'll have Gorilla Glass 4 if the 5X doesn't have Gorilla Glass 4. And then I think that's it. So like, I don't know if a bigger display and those extra specs are worth the extra $70 to you guys. For people who can deal with a 16 gigabyte phone at $379.99, then that's a lot cheaper for sure. Like, I would go with that if you prefer a smaller phone, but you also have to remember on a 16 gigabyte phone, there is no expandable storage on the Nexus phone, so you can't put a micro SD slot or a micro SD card in there. So 16 gigabytes is 16 gigabytes. You're not going to get any more. Sometimes that can add up really fast when you start having a lot of apps on your phone, and then you're saving video, pictures, music, all that kind of stuff, which is where having a lot of cloud integration is going to come in handy for people who need that if you have such a small capacity phone. Other things I wanted to point out though, so again, there is no micro SD card, so there's no option for expandable memory. I also read that there is no wireless charging on the 6P. I also believe there's going to be no wireless charging on the 5X either. I know the 6P is going to have, they said an all-metal body. I don't know if the 5X is going to have some plastics instead, so build quality might even be better on the 6P, but this is all hearsay. I really don't know. There's no way to test it until these really start coming out and people get their hands on them. And then the final thing I wanted to mention is that both phones are showing that they're not going to have OIS, or optical image stabilization, which I found was kind of a bummer. My Nexus 6, my 2014 Nexus 6 had OIS, and my Nexus 5, 2013 had OIS. So to see them kind of take it out, I was a little bummed out by that. OIS, I think it's one of those things you really don't notice until you really need them. I read that a lot of that comes in handy if you kind of have a shaky hand, or especially in low light when you really need to be still with dimmer shots. It comes in handy, so it'll be sad if that doesn't show up. And so I mentioned how I'm assuming that, okay, so if the 5X is going to price at $379.99, then I'm assuming that the 32 gig is $429.99. Now, there have been no reports on that. I'm just saying there's probably going to be a $50 increment. So in that respect, for the 6P, because the 6P starts at $499.99 at 32 gigs, I would imagine the 64 gig version is going to be $549.99. And I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers, that the 128 gigabyte version of the Nexus 6P is going to be $599.99, so right under $600, which would be great because that's the one I'm looking for. at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is to see if the Nexus 6P is going to be my daily driver, or if I'm going to end up keeping my Moto X Pure Edition. I'm going to keep both. You know, I have 2 lines, and one is going to be my primary, one's going to be my secondary, so we'll see which one ends up being the primary. But, sorry, I'm like looking at my notes and I was like, the one thing that I didn't see on either of these phones is there was no mention of the Quick Charge 2.0. That's really important for me. I don't know if I could have a phone again without a Quick Charge on it. It's a really handy feature, especially when you need to power up in a pinch. I don't know if the 808 and 810 Snapdragon processors already have that built in. Hopefully if they do, that's great, because it's a really great feature to have. So we'll see. The last thing is tune in, you know, for the announcement tomorrow. So I wrote down here the time. So tomorrow, Google's going to be announcing these phones and probably a couple other items at 12 p.m. Eastern. For me in Chicago, 11 a.m. Central. For Mountain people, 10 a.m. Yeah, I wrote it all down, guys. So 10 a.m. for Mountain and 9 a.m. for Pacific. So hopefully this video helps you guys give you a clear decision, or a better decision on which phone you're going to pick, if you're going to pick it, if you're going to look for a Nexus tomorrow, if you're going to try to pre-order it. Or this might help you with your decision on a Moto X Pure Edition or a Nexus. But I would at least stay tuned for the event and the announcement and see what they really end up with, and then you guys can maybe make a better decision then. Again, if you guys have any questions or whatever, feel free to comment. I try to answer as much as I can, so hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Alright guys, until the next one, take it easy.